All right, good morning, everyone. How are you doing? All right, sounds good. I'm Aaron Nelson. This is my colleague.
I'm Christie Subirats.
All right, we are pleased to be here today for BP, and we're going to share some lessons from our company's complete agile transformation. BP is a massive company, as you may know, is one of the globe's handful of energy majors, but it might be more diverse. And so while we'll start with talking about what happens in production operations, we're actually going to go what happens all the way to where it starts to reach you as the customer. Chris is going to cover some of that. So for instance, my dev teams consist of petroleum engineers, geologists, and geophysicists. My stakeholders, their stakeholders are on the offshore oil platforms right out here in the Gulf of Mexico. So I'm going to begin by sharing what I've learned from working with people who extract the oil from underneath the ground, and then hand things over to Christie to share what happens with her work being done reaching the people at the pump. So first off, I'm glad we've all gathered here in Austin. We've got some of the brightest minds here in Agile, and I'm just glad that we can all come together and finally admit that we know everything that there is to know about Agile, right? And that the world would just be a better place if they would just be quiet and listen to us, right? Wrong. I'm here to talk about what we do when we hit that wall with our customers. How can we get them to listen to us and begin the process of Agile adoption and eventually transformation? How do we bridge that gap of their current situations and ways of working to where we want to take them? Hint, it is not an internal monologue. You don't wrestle with yourself. You're going to have to work with that team. So we're going to focus on the people side of things. You have to meet those people where they are. So I'm going to go over 3 steps today to go from someone who is simply introducing and teaching Agile to someone who truly helps teams become Agile, go from doing to being Agile. So who am I? I'm Aaron Nelson. I'm a certified Scrum Master, product owner, and Agile coach. I've spent the past 2 decades in training, instructional design, and Agile. It's helped me build digital products in the finance industry at JP Chase, payment processing software for web hosting companies. I've delivered marketing campaigns with marketing teams. I work with nonprofits in my spare time using Agile, and even I've built hardware apps such as the HP Support Assistant. Now I'm in the energy industry, working for BP, where I serve as an agility discipline lead, responsible for building BP's internal roster of skilled Agile coaches. Plus, I'm a husband of 20 years, and I'll chauffeur 2 teenagers around, so I know a bit about working with people. As I said, I'm going to give you 3 steps to meet teams where they are and how it's worked in my role at BP. The first thing I want you to do is decenter yourself. I want you to take the spotlight off of you. Being a coach is a lonely place. I know you want to add your value. I know you want to be important. I know you may have certain techniques and people, want to learn from you. But taking the focus off yourself will allow you to place the focus on others, the people you serve. The perspective shifts, and the result is a deeper, more objective focus. I've introduced Agile a number of places. And one of the most exciting is working with the production and operations team at BP. In particular, I focus with the well-designed teams. It's sort of like space exploration, but the frontier of the depths of the ocean. I get the pleasure of working with some of those brilliant people that I've ever worked with. Christie, you are a petroleum engineer. Could you give some of the details about how, what the environment is like in which they work?
Yeah, so this is Thunder Horse, a picture of Thunder Horse. And the platforms I worked on, we floated in about 5,000 feet of water, and then our wells would be thousands and thousands of feet deep. So we're talking about big numbers here.
So they're working on that, and then I show up like, hey, what do you know about Post-it notes? So, I really have to realize where I stand in the big scheme of things. So I silence my ego, and I sit with people. It's high risk, high hazard environment. So I need to learn what's important to them. I need to learn why physical and environmental safety is so important to them. I got to embrace the scale of the operations they participate in. That's one of the 4 that are in the Gulf of Mexico alone. I've got to walk the design floor. I've got to sit in their operations meetings. I've got to quietly become one of them. This opens the door to my second step. Author and poet Maya Angelou has a famous quote: "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." That's only half the quote. The rest is because these people know themselves much better than you do. So that's their world. It's not for me I can't take what they do as engineers, geophysicists, and put that in straight development terms. It doesn't match that way. So I've got to explain what's in it for them. Once I know who they are, I know where they need to start. So I have to whiff them, show them what's in it for them. What's the benefit of becoming agile? And so with that, I begin to earn their respect and gain their trust as I position myself as an enabler, a tool that can help them win. So I have to ask them, what does winning look like to them? So with the engineers who work in well design, that could mean decreasing inactive time, working on another well when there's no time to work on another, delivering wells sooner, all while maintaining impeccable quality and safety, accuracy with the wells are located underground, and doing so as safely as possible. And then I have to maintain the trust and respect. That's my third step. So here's my obligatory Brene Brown quote. It turns out that trust is in fact earned in the smallest of moments. It is earned not through heroic deeds or even highly visible actions, but through paying attention, listening, and gestures of genuine care and connection. So remember, I said to decenter yourself, take the focus off myself and all my training skills, my teaching skills. Maybe I did the role before them in some spaces, but I need to respect their time. These engineers have a lot going on at once, and the old me would have felt that if I just kept talking, more whiteboard time, more mural time, that they'll get it. But to get them to adopt, I've got to respect how they use their time. And that includes slowing down to speed up. I mean, you see the scale of this. So we initially did large team launches that have facilitation, other peripherals. It was a lot of training. We did dozens of teams. But research shows that within 1 hour, people will forget an average of 50% of the information you just presented. Within a day, they've forgotten about 70% of what you just presented. So nice meeting you. You're going to forget everything I'm saying here anyway. But I also think that's why it's important and okay that if you hear some of us present some of the same messages about how to treat people and work with people throughout the day. So for agility to become a part of their lives, I had to become very practical. I had to integrate those small trust-building moments. So for these Wells designers, that meant that I had to actually slow down the cadence to match the pace of the work. There was no one-day turnaround on assignments. It was large-scale work, and so daily stand-ups were futile. It was just people showing up, and that was a waste of their time. So I had to slow down the pace of the work, but instead, I didn't just extend sprints, but we used that additional time to kind of use it like bullet time. While the pace of delivery was slow, that allowed us to sort of weave in and do some of the education that we needed, some of the practical planning, road mapping, and other things that would help them to be more efficient. Then finally, we're in the people business. So it's imperative that we make it our focus to connect. The 3 points I'm mentioning here can be applied anywhere. My wife's in the people business. She is an ordained minister, and during the COVID pandemic, she served as a chaplain. So she did these same 3 steps. It was not work she could do from the couch. Like you today, she had to put on pants and PPE and go into the hospital to serve people. She would be visited or be requested to go to people where they were. She had to meet them where they were at. She had to listen to people. That included patients with COVID, patients waiting on their surgeries that were delayed by the people with COVID, the families, and even the staff who worked at the hospital. So she had to understand what was in it for them and their unique needs, which included praying with them, calling families, even braiding their hair before surgeries. And then she had to respect their time by serving their unique needs in a way that they can make the most of their time, whether it be before their next treatment exam or even with a family after someone had passed. And so I say that so you can apply this to whatever industry that you work in. So remember, there are 3 steps for you to connect with the teams to move them forward. That is to decenter yourself, 1. 2, explain what's in it for them. Let them own the assignment. And 3, respect their time. That's been working in production and operations. Now we're going to hand it over to Christie to explain what happens at the other end.
Yeah, so thanks, Aaron, for that. What's your favorite donut?
A dozen.
A dozen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about our customer and products business in BP. So BP is a very diverse company, and we go throughout the value chain of energy. So just real quick about me, Christie Subirats. I'm a licensed professional engineer. I'm a chemical engineer by education. I spent a decade working in specialty and commodity chemicals, wearing PPE as well, just steel-toed boots and hard hat. I've switched them out for my high heels now that I'm an agility coach. I moved into BP about 11 years ago, and I started working offshore in operations and maintenance positions before moving into agility. I took my first Scrum class, and that was really a game changer for me. And I really thought, gosh, if we can lean into this and to becoming more agile at scale globally, and we begin adopting this, we could really change things. And so I was convinced. And my full-time role right now is I'm a lead coach, and I lead a team of coaches for our mobility and convenience business in the Americas. So outside of work, my husband and I have 5 kids, ranging in age from 3 to 22, including my 14-year-old who pulls weekend shifts at a local donut shop, which is a good segue back to donuts and our recipe for success, agility success in our customer and products business. Now here in Texas, we don't see a lot of BP or Amoco branded fuels, but across the states, we have over 8,000 retail fuel sites and nearly 1,000 retail convenience sites. So the scale we have is a lot different than the scale that Aaron just talked about. Our numbers are just different. 2021 was a huge year for our business. It was the year we really leaned into and launched agility as part of our ways of working, as well as the year that the Thornton's brand became part of our BP family, including their donuts and all. So if you travel through Kentucky, Tennessee, parts of Florida, and Illinois, you may be familiar with the Thornton's brand. But speaking of donuts, those key ingredients that go into a great donut can also be related to a little bit of our recipe for success with Agile. And without spilling any of our magic, I'll share a few of those real-world ingredients with you. So what goes into a donut? Think about flour and sugar, right? That's the bulk of the ingredients that go into a donut. But it can be messy, right? Especially if you add it in all at once, right? You add it in all at once and you turn on the machine and it's just gonna come all up at you and make a giant mess. But flour, sugar, it's messy. The flour, it just doesn't taste good by itself. And then just like in real life, some people are allergic to it and just have a bad reaction to it. So in our Agile journey, we didn't dump it all in at once and turn the machine on. We knew that this would be part of a journey, and we wanted to be purposeful. We wanted to work at pace. So we started with a bit of a leadership mindset, ways of working, and just to reinforce everything. We started with new language like impediments, minimal viable products, capacity, retrospectives, OKRs. We really started to live these elements daily and sprinkle them into our work. As we incorporated them into what we did, we added a little bit more. And to this day, we're still adding a little bit of flour, if you will, to our recipe. It is a journey after all. After the flour and sugar, you might want to add some yeast, right? Yeast is the growth engine of a baked good. And when you open a package of yeast, there's tiny little granules in that package. There's hundreds and thousands of grains there, and just by sitting there by themselves, they really don't do anything. But when it's added to the recipe, things really start to happen, and the dough begins to rise. What's made us rise in our Agile journey is the growth mindset and to live a learning culture. It's not about fear of failure and what goes wrong and whose fault was it and, how do we punish you? It's not that. It's about learning from it. Okay, it didn't go as planned. So what did we learn? It's leaning into that and having that growth mindset, giving permission, empowering, delegating, collaborating for discussion and decision. In an example, I had one of my teams trying to drive a business process efficiency, and those processes that sit in a document about that thick, and when you start mapping it out, it just looks like a big bowl of spaghetti of flow of work. You can't tell where the beginning and the end is, and even what it is in between. But we sat down in a room with some sticky notes and a whiteboard and just started mapping out and trying to figure out how to simplify it. The leader came back in the room, and I pulled him aside and I said, hey, I think we want to break your process. And I was, I had the courage to come out and say it, and I don't know, I think we want to break our process. And he said 3 little words to me that just have stuck with me as a team member, as a leader, as a coach. And those 3 little words were, tell me more. He was giving me permission to play. He was giving the team permission to break the rules. Now, we're not breaking the rules and taking on risk. It's not like that. It's breaking the rules in a way that we can reimagine things to get to the outcome we needed, which was to fix this spaghetti bowl of a process. That's where the growth happens. So when it comes to growth, the yeast in the donut recipe, a little bit can go a long way. The power of Agile comes in those hundreds of micro moments that you share with your team. It's pointing out where they're practicing those behaviors, even though they may not realize it, they may not call it that. It's all that learning as part of their progress that they have on their Agile journey. The next ingredient is butter and eggs. That's right. It's the thing that binds everything together. And in our recipe, this was really, for success, it was really about bringing people together, breaking down those silos, creating space for cross-functional discussions, and maintaining a customer obsession. What bound us together was coming together and spending time to reflect on how we work together and how we can improve our ways of working. The retrospective. It really is a powerful tool. Recently, the digital manager in my team, he came to me and he said, my team's struggling. They're overwhelmed. They've got these operational issues that are just consuming them, and they want to add more people to the team. They think that's how we're going to solve the problem, is with more people. So I came in and helped the team, kind of coached them through teasing out what issues they had. We started putting buckets of work up on the board, and we had a bucket for things that were in their control and things that were not in their control. And the bucket of things that were in their control to fix was flowing over. And it was visualizing that, bringing that out, bringing the team together to have that conversation and just put it all on the table really changed the room. They walked out of that room feeling empowered and energized because they knew how to remove the blockers they were getting in their own way. And so being a tighter team, leaving the room together, it's just like pulling the dough together when you add the butter and the eggs to the mix to solve the problem on your own. I could go on these, on and on about donuts for a long time, but we do have a time box for our chat. So the last ingredient I'll mention is the frosting and the sprinkles. It's the fun stuff in a donut. And Aaron, I personally love this part of the Agile journey. I get to flex the creative side of my brain, and I'm motivated by how we can use Agile to make how we work feel different, to make it fun. This summer, I facilitated a session with 45 senior level leaders to discuss some really big ideas, some really fun things. To get them out of their comfort zone, I handed out a bunch of 11 by 17 pieces of paper and markers. I mean, these are vice presidents I had in the room, senior vice presidents, and handed them Crayola markers and paper and said, get to drawing. It was really interesting because our VP of finance is a pretty creative guy. He's pretty artistic, and he works with numbers every day. But the games, the markers, the frosting, the sprinkles, who doesn't all love that? We all love that. But I didn't start here for a reason. The keynote speaker didn't start there today with the fun. You've got to bring the substance when you start the Agile journey before you add in the fun, because otherwise it'd be like trying to frost an empty donut. You just end up with a lot of fluff. So you start with the bulk ingredients like flour and sugar, adding in those Agile practices and tools a little at a time. Your grains of yeast, those micro moments that accelerate growth, butter and eggs to bind the team together, And we've got and then some frosting and sprinkles on top. And that's the recipe for our successful Agile journey. I'm sure we've made folks here hungry, and we're standing between them and a break. So I'll pivot and see if there's any questions, especially from our friends on Zoom.
Oh, sure. The question was, what do you do when you find that stand-ups aren't productive? And so what have we done? And there are a few things we've done. So one was the pace. When the work, what was the use of coming together every single day if half of those days were going to be spent saying nothing was done? So X those out. We'll have to use the phrase, give people their time back. Another thing is, if you'll notice with the scale of everything, we have people meeting. So now we're also dealing with the process of a lot of redundant meetings. Introducing Agile, people were doing it first. They were layering all the Agile meetings on top of the other things. So we became outcome focused, which is you're getting together in a room with people. Could we maybe add 1 or 2 people to those existing meetings and get some of the same outcomes? Is it just a matter of asking an additional question in one of those meetings that will still give us some of the same impact? So we really tried to see where we could get that little space and do something a little bit different.
Yeah, so just playing back, so how have we helped folks connect with things, like you said, they're senior level leaders. How do we help connect with agility and kind of convince, and why hadn't they thought about it beforehand? So it's, a lot of the things we do, come naturally to us, but there's a lot of art into it, but there's also a bit of science in what we do, and there's a process, right? And certainly leaders across all of our organizations are very successful because they're in those leadership positions, right? But I think there's enough use cases in agility where we've been able to bring that and say, if we just try something different, let's just experiment, let's start small, and then take a step back and see how we're doing, right? And just encouraging the leaders to have their own courage to just try something different, but not come in full force with it, not dumping all the flour in the pot, at once. And so that's what I found has been helpful, is to not use a lot of jargon and frameworks and systems and tools. I don't start with tools. I start with what's the conversation we're trying to have, what's the outcome we're focused on, and then come later with that, add it in once we get hold of it.
Asking for change introduced a lot of change fatigue because IT is asking for new systems. The company has new policies. We're introducing new things. But that magic word experiment, people have told us how much confidence it gave them. And so we get a little bit formal. What's your hypothesis? What's that change? So now it's not just you shooting from the hip. It is thinking through an hypothesis. They carve out the space to experiment and then see the results and retrospect and reflect it. And now it feels like something much more controllable, even though it is a change. And that's been a huge win for us.
That's a great way to wrap it up, everyone.
Thank you.